and welcome to this panel which is very promising indeed. I will introduce briefly the participants because most of them hardly need any introduction, and then I will introduce the topic itself. Javed Akhtar is probably the most famous scriptwriter, lyricist, and poet, former Rajya Sabha member till last year or the year before, but very recently you were still in this assembly, sir. And of course, he was awarded the honor of Padma Bhushan 10 years ago. Pinky Anand, a lawyer and a politician. She's been a member of the BJP National Executive, and she's been appointed Additional Solicitor General of India. Salman Khurshid has joined politics under Indira Gandhi in the early 80s. He has been a Union Minister of Law and Justice, and then of External Affairs, and is also an author, as we will return to it very soon. Last but not least, Saif Mahmood, an advocate of the Supreme Court, an expert in Urdu poetry, and the author of Beloved Delhi, also an author indeed, a Mughal city and greatest poets. I like the air.
Thank you.
Islam and modernity. Well, let me at the outset tell you that I'm not very happy with the title. And it's not mine at all. For two reasons that may set the terms of the debate today. First of all, the singular. Is there anything like one Islam? Is there anything like one modernity? I was so disturbed that I returned to a book that is 25 years old and that is called Islams and Modernities. I like it. It's a really good book by Aziz Al-Azmi that indeed shows that there is not much in common between Wahhabism and Sufism, between Saudi Arabia's Islam and South Asian Islam. So the first problem is the singular. But there is another problem. Why should we focus on the way Muslims relate to modernity alone? Are they the only ones having a problem with modernity? And if so, what does it suggest? What does it imply? Well, you can't avoid to define modernity if you ask this question to such limited extent. And for me, modernity has something to do with freedom, equality, dignity of the person. And therefore, Muslims are not the only ones having problems with modernity for sure. And I went to some indicators of the Census of India to check whether in terms of infant mortality rate, in terms of sex ratio, maybe Muslims were more modern than any other Indian community, and they are indeed. And I really invite you to check this data because they are really very revealing. So I wanted to somewhat confuse you about the topic, but also to somewhat give a sense of direction. The terms of the debate may not be for good. They may be discussed. And the last point I like to do, because it's in tune with my work on the dargahs today, I can hardly find any place more free, more congenial, more egalitarian as Ajmer Sharif, Ferozshah Kotla, so many others, you know them. So let's really wonder ourselves whether the question is really to put Muslims on the defensive or whether it's according to the entry point you chose. The entry point many of you will choose will be the Crippled Talaq debate because that's something we will not avoid.
I thought that's the exit point.
Final exit. So if nobody wants to take it as an entry point, it's fine with me.
Let's start with it.
But I would be very surprised if that was the case. So since we can ask ladies first to start the conversation, I invite you to do it.
Thank you. I mean, it's ladies first and the only lady on this panel. But yes, indeed, you've raised quite a few points, I think, on this topic issue. But as far as triple talaq is concerned, for a moment just to focus on that, it is something, I think, that has been inviting the wrath of the community as well as all communities. I mean, that is something that I felt very distinctively, and I'll share with you. On certain public forums, when this debate was on, prior to the Supreme Court judgment in Saira Bano's case, which came last year, of course, a historic judgment, and some of you would have read it, I found that every member of, in fact, from the community and various communities, was opposed to triple talaq. Now, triple talaq itself, it was triple talaq, nikah halala, and polygamy, which formed this trio or triumvirate of issues that had come up for consideration. It was felt that it was arbitrary, it was discriminatory, it was against the interest of women, it was against the issue of development, it was against public morals, it was against social development, it was contrary to, or maybe it was also a democratic deficit, because you didn't allow women to actually come on fore. So on all these fronts, you found that community-wise also there was this entire motivation to transform the story. And incidentally, it is not peculiar of changing traditions in various religions, and it's happened in other religions also. I mean, even amongst Hinduism, for example, you've had practices like sati. Now, they were derogatory, considered, again, discriminatory, were struck down by legislation. In this case, of course, this has come by way of a judgment of the court. But again, then when triple talaq issue came up and the three issues came up, the Supreme Court confined it to only to triple talaq and not dealing with the other two practices, which incidentally have today come up an issue and possibly will be dealt with in due course of time. But a very interesting manner of development, triple talaq was not ultimately struck down on the count of arbitrariness, on the count of discrimination, gender discrimination, which in a way we felt when we were appearing for the government. And in fact, this was the time when the government itself brought forth that this practice was derogatory to women and therefore should be struck down. At that point of time, you found that the entire focus of the court and the judgment has been there. It was a 3-2. The ratio was 3-2. As you know, it is a 5-judge bench judgment, which ultimately held that it was totally arbitrary. How can you have a unilateral divorce done on the whim of a person at a moment without any intervention of mediation or any other third authority that was required to look at it? And why should it prevail in a country like India, where most other countries had given up the practice of unilateral talaq, or the triple talaq as it's popularly known as. So it was principally on this ground that the Supreme Court came down, I think, on this entire issue, and much to the satisfaction of all concerned. I don't think you had much issue on who had any opposition to this ground whatsoever, and therefore triple talaq came to be considered as a derogatory practice, arbitrary practice. Gender discrimination was never considered, though argued by the government also, and maybe it is a focal point, but it wasn't required. So triple talaq on this count struck down on the ground of being contrary to public order, to health, and something which is a crime, as somebody said. If it is a crime, it is a crime. The further aspects, polygamy, is something which was practiced not as a matter of religion, but as a matter of social order, as a custom, but more towards a social order rather than a religious ritual. A wide panorama of discussions, but ultimately to come down to one issue, to say, do you require an egalitarian society where things are determined by the rule of law and by the rule of public morals and not on individual counts or individual criteria? I think that has been the complete crux of the judgment, aside from the fact that it is the obligation of the state as well as the country to ensure that there is practices which are consistent with not only modernity, but of an egalitarian society.
Thank you. Mr. Khurshid, you wrote a book on the whole thing. What is your take on it today?
I don't want our discussion to be focused on triple talaq, so I'll be very, very precise. I think that the mistake that's being made is to understand whether people are opposed to talaq or they're opposed to triple talaq. Nobody except the Attorney General attempted to say, let's do away with talaq. Talaq is a 1400-year-old instrument available to people in Islam, which Christianity, Hinduism, and other religions have by legislation got in the last 20 years. But talaq is unilateral and only for the man is a wrong perception. Talaq is, in my understanding, not unilateral because there is a certain procedure that you have to go through, which is reconciliation, people coming together, etc., etc. In any case, women have an equal right of divorce under khula. But a woman has to necessarily go to an adjudicating authority who has no option but to give the divorce, goes to the adjudicating authority only to ensure that all her rights are protected. The right of maintenance, the right of maintenance of children, the right of meher, the dower that she is supposed to get instantly or immediately upon divorce, etc. Therefore, to say that talaq is not egalitarian is be wrong. And unfortunately, the Supreme Court didn't have the time and certainly didn't have the opportunity to discuss this entire thing and look at the detailed package, as it were, is available to a woman. Be that as it may, what is triple talaq? Triple talaq is part of talaq which has been adulterated into an instant talaq. Triple talaq actually means that any man has a right under law to give talaq only 3 times to a woman. You give a talaq first, you can take it back within 3 months of the iddat. You give a talaq second time, you can take it back within 3 months. In both cases, you can remarry the woman in case you haven't taken it back, provided she agrees, fresh dower, fresh meher, etc. Third time when the man says talaq, he's told, now no more. You can't take it back, you can't remarry her, it's over now. You can't make a joke of a relationship. Now, I don't think that what the judgment has done is to allow people to reflect on what is the totality of the package that's available. And lastly, let us not forget that the best judgment, as far as I'm concerned, was of Justice Korean Joseph, who said, I've looked at the Quran, and the Quran doesn't provide for instant form of triple talaq. The other judges were only looking at various instruments as to, can Parliament do this away, or can we do it away, etc. But Korean Joseph, who was part of the majority, said this doesn't exist in Islam. Now, if it doesn't exist in Islam, therefore, Islam is actually quite modern, better than many other religions, which are just barely catching up with Islam. And therefore, the very discussion of Islam and modernity has been put on its head by treating this as not modern and forgetting what the modernity in Islam is and emphasizing the modernity rather than saying that Islam is terrible and therefore we've changed it and made it modern.
Thank you. Saif, do you want to close the conversation on the triple
Yes,
talaq?
I do, in just 2 lines. I just want to add on to what Mr. Khurshid has said. The Supreme Court has, while declaring triple talaq illegal, actually relied upon Islamic law rather than repelling Islamic law. That's the truth of the matter. And the other thing I want to point out is there are 2 separate, there is a minority judgment by the Chief Justice and another judge agreeing with him. There are 2 separate judgments which form the majority judgment. Justice Korean Joseph's judgment actually says what is not found in Quran can never be found in Shariat. So what is bad in Quran can't be good in Shariat. These are his words. So he relies upon the Quran and the Hadith and finds that triple talaq is un-Islamic, and therefore, since it's un-Islamic, he doesn't deem it proper to decide whether it is unconstitutional or not. As long as it is un-Islamic, that's the end of the matter. Islamic law applies, it's un-Islamic, so set aside. The other judgment of Justice Nariman says, in addition to all this, I also hold that triple talaq, since the word talaq is mentioned in a statute which applies to Muslims, it is open to this court to judicially review the concept of triple talaq. I have tested it on the cornerstone of the guarantees mentioned in the Constitution and Article 14, and I hold that in addition to being un-Islamic, it is also unconstitutional for being arbitrary. So that's the judgment of the Supreme Court.
I just want one line to close. Just one comment on both what Salman and what Saif said. Unfortunately, I mean, much as Justice Korean Joseph held that it was not Islamic, triple talaq was not. But the fact of the matter is what was considered by the Supreme Court was the practice of triple talaq as a unilateral divorce, which was considered and which was struck down. And that is the principle, I think, which is an issue here today. The only question is not whether Islam is modern or Islam is not modern, but this practice is definitely not modern, and this is something not acceptable.
Yes, like many other practices across religions.
By all means.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you for these clarifications. None of the TV channels had given us the subtext as you did. Javed, when we prepared this just a while ago, you said in this formula, Islam and modernity, I'm in the end. What would you mean by that? And how do you see this?
No, I have decided to start this conversation on a very positive note.
Good.
Because I should give the good news first and then we'll talk about other things. So recently, I think Islamic societies and Islamic countries have taken a huge leap towards modernity. One has to accept that. Now women can drive cars in Saudi Arabia. After having said this, I have 2-3 points, I'll make them quickly. One, it doesn't interest me whether triple talaq is allowed in Islam, or it is in Quran, or it is in Sharia, or it is nowhere. It is there, it is not there. There are many things that are there, like slavery is allowed in Quran. But we will not approve of slavery. Buying and selling women is allowed in Quran. But we will not accept that. The same way, it doesn't concern me whether it is mentioned in Quran or it is not mentioned in Quran. This is a wrong practice, and it should be stopped in a civilized society. Point 2. This is just a fig leaf on the reality that women have equal right to divorce. In a male chauvinistic society, if a woman wants divorce, she has to go to some qazi, who happens to be a man. I know of women who have gone to qazis and they have laughed at her face. It is for years women have struggled to get a divorce. It's not possible. Besides that, I think it's not religious, but a regressive attitude in Muslim ulamas and Maulvis that they insist on this. The fact is that the same people, when they go to Singapore, when they go to USA, when they go to France, they have no bigamy there. They can't divorce wives like that. I think all the ulama should give fatwa that no Muslim should go to such un-Islamic countries. As long as you can accept that in England, as long as you can accept that in USA, what is wrong with India? Why can't you accept it here? Yes. That you cannot have 2 wives. You cannot divorce a wife like this, and so on. You can't do that in USA. It's not possible. But you go, I mean, the first thing a mullah would want, a green card for his son. And he will send his son to a place where there is no Islamic law. But they want Islamic law here. Why? Point 2. Why only Islam? Islam and modernity. The topic should have been religion and modernity. You can be modern in spite of your religion, not because of it. Whether you are a Hindu or a Muslim or a Christian or a Jew, you can be modern. If you are a true Hindu, you should believe in untouchability and caste, because it's an integral part of Hinduism. But you are a good person. You don't believe in it. So people can be good in spite of their religion. There are many Muslims who are good people, like me,
Despite
of my religion.
Despite being Muslim.
No religion. It is an oxymoron, modern religion. What does it mean? A thing which has been locked and the key has been thrown 100 years ago. How can it be modern? This world will fail in one day if you stop interest system. In Islam, interest is haram. But buying and selling the slave is not haram, because interest was taken by Jews and Arabs used to deal in slavery. So these are obsolete things. They belong to museums. All these religions. Talking about Islam and modernity. Any religion. Which religion you want to talk about? Why only Islam? All of them are obsolete.
Marxism.
Oh, it is obsolete. It is obsolete. It has gone obsolete.
It has withered away. It has withered away.
No,
Yeah.
but unfortunately,
It means it was not that bad. You see, cancer is the worst disease. It doesn't go away.
but you can't say
Other
that is
diseases,
right.
typhoid, malaria, you can cure that. So that is cured. Religion has not gone.
No, but Javed bhai, you can't say that religion is not relevant for the reason, much as one would like to be modern or can be modern outside of religion, but it is not possible. For example, if you have such practices, which for a moment I'm talking about Islam, you have practices like triple talaq, it is binding on the communities to actually practice that, you can't get out of it. So how can you be modern
It is binding
while
on
such...
the Islamic community to practice triple talaq.
No,
It is an oxymoron.
Within that, it is permissible by religion and therefore practiced. If it wasn't permissible, it wouldn't be practiced. That's what I was trying to say.
Yes.
So let's come to the point. So therefore,
Anything which was decided 2000 years ago.
for example, polygamy was allowed in Hindus pre-1956. It is only in 1956 when the laws were changed that you could not have more than one marriage. I mean, it's a law that was changed around
And
to
Hindus
change it
resent
around.
it a lot.
Sorry?
They are very angry that Muslims can marry more than
I don't
they are
think-
not upset that they can't marry again.
I think-
they are upset these bastards can.
In
No,
Bangladesh,
I think modernity means that most men realize that they can't handle more than one wife anyways. So don't go beyond that.
I'm more than happy to redefine the title
thank you. Thank you.
and to look at religion and modernity.
Please bring us
Or
back to the-
religions and
Yes.
modernity. And in what Javed has just said, there is a very interesting reference to religious figures, religious leaders, mullahs on the Muslim side. There are others on other sides. Isn't it the root of the matter? At least a very important part of the problem. What kind of elite do you have? What kind of leaders do you have? And in that case, the question could be, do we see more conservative leaders in some religious communities than in others? How would you respond to that, Salman?
Well, I think it's a situational thing, and I suspect in answering what Javed bhai said, it's very difficult to play by rules that have changed. The point is, do we or do we not understand and accept that religion is part of social reality? Now, if it is, how much of it is to be preserved? How much of it can be changed? The essential, integral part of religion, the add-ons that can be changed, I think that's the very big question. One interesting question that I was asked about, why can't we have egalitarian marriages by the people who are interested in uniform civil code? And when I said to them, I'm all for egalitarian marriages, but egalitarian marriages of what kind? Of what model? And would you then also accept same-sex marriages? And suddenly this man jumped out of the chair and said, we are Indians, how can you suggest something of this nature? I said, well, it's modern, it's in Europe, it's in the US, how come it's not in India? Imported it into India and then talk about uniformity in marriage laws, then talk about egalitarianism in marriage laws, and then we will believe that you really are egalitarian. Are you doing it only because you want to demonize a particular system and just strike down that part of the system and not follow the analytical conclusions that inevitably you will have to reach? Why don't we accept same-sex marriages if we believe in egalitarian law?
I'll answer that. You see, you climb up step by step. Because you don't want the humanity to take the first step, you tell them, why don't you take the 10th step? This is only to defend this. Not that you are in favor of same-sex marriages. If you are, tell us. We are listening. Are you in favor of same-sex marriages?
I've just said so. It's
No,
inevitable.
no. Are you?
If you're in favor of equality in marriage, then you can't.
Otherwise, there should not be any equality.
No.
This is the point.
No.
Either same-sex marriages or divorce will be there.
Are you against same-sex marriages? Are you against same-sex marriages?
No, I'm not.
Are you against marriage as an institution? I think there are a lot of people
Because
who believe.
I believe that any marriage after some time becomes same-sex marriage.
I thought there's another.
Yeah.
You can't read that.
We will try not to broaden the topic too much
to say something.
Chalo.
and retain religion as one of the terms
Islam.
of the debate. And Salman Khurshid has just said something, asking a question that is, of course, key. Do we recognize religion as part of the public sphere and public life? Well, I've always considered that it was the subtext of secularism in India. Secularism means that indeed religion is very much recognized as legitimate in the public sphere. But the problem now is,
What religion?
yes, and are all the religions on a par? Because we see some new developments, not that, well, recently in fact. In Gurgaon, to offer namaz in public became a problem. Is it not a sense that some of the religions can be public and others cannot be public anymore?
You see, we tend to confuse two things which are sometimes similar and same and sometimes totally different. Communalism and religion. These are two different things.
I'm glad you make that point.
Like communalism is pure meanness, while religion is pure stupidity.
So let's
So let's not mix them.
let's rescue spirituality.
What
Let's
people
only
who have objections
he also
that
has an
why
objection to
these people are
spirituality.
praying in this place, they have nothing against religion.
Yeah.
They are communal. So they just want to harass the community, that's about all. It has nothing to do with religion.
But aren't they communal against a particular religion only?
No, yeah, you can be. Of course, you can be. Like you don't like kafirs if you are a good Muslim.
Yes.
And all the kafirs are they will
Samajhte
go to hell, of course.
Zahid tang nazar ne mujhe kafir
But then do we see a redefinition of the role of religion because of majoritarianism? And in such a way that secularism is, of course, the first casualty of this trend.
No, but the point is, how are you coming to that conclusion?
I'm
If you're
asking the question.
Yes, I know. But I mean, sorry, the question then. But let's come to the point. I mean, what is the issue today? If you're talking about secularism, secularism can mean one of two things. Either equal exercise of, let's say, positions as far as the personal laws are concerned. Secondly, for each of the personal laws to be egalitarian, equal, giving equal status to all the members of the community. Thirdly, what is religion? That itself is always a question mark, because does religion mean issues like marriage, succession, inheritance, custody of children, are all these issues to be considered within the same life? So you have, it is a very broad spectrum that you have to really come to a conclusion of what really you are looking at. And I think today what you are looking at is a position not necessarily of saying all religions should be equal, but that all religions should have positions which result in equality qua the own community, or at least to have a semblance of social development within the premise itself. So all practices which are archaic, all practices which are contrary or derogatory or don't give similar status to people within the community. So today, for example, on the aspect of triple talaq, even for that matter, nikah, halala and polygamy, you are having three positions of discrimination for Muslim women. You're having discrimination vis-a-vis Hindu or other religions, that kind of discrimination. You're having discrimination qua the men and the women. So women have certain rights only, whereas men can unilaterally divorce at their women fancy, particularly this, whether it's a bad practice or good practice, un-Islamic, but it's being practiced. And third, you have discrimination qua other countries. All other countries seem to have done away with instant talaq, as it is called. I'm talking about that in particular. I'm not talking about other forms of talaq. They've done away with those practices, including Pakistan, Afghanistan, Morocco, you name it. So you're continuing to have a practice which is prevailing for the sake of saying, no, there should be secularism. So therefore, in the name of secularism, keep an absolutely derogatory practice consistently going on. Don't touch it. Everybody run away from it because it's dangerous. Don't touch this territory. No, we need to answer to a situation where we are today. And that is the only test.
Thank you. So if we somewhat move on and leave triple talaq for good behind us, I'd like to ask another question that has to do with education, because education and modernity somewhat go together.
Yes.
Looking at the data, we have now rather robust data showing that Muslims are even less educated than Dalits when you look at the graduates, less well off than Dalits, less represented in all the administration bodies, IAS, IPS, because there's no reservation. And therefore we can wonder, can't India do what Mr. Netanyahu is doing in Israel? and educate Arabs because you can't have a drag of so many people behind you? And if so, what is the solution? Is positive discrimination something we can think about?
I'm afraid we can't do what Mr. Nansu is doing it because we have not conquered anybody's territory. And we are not taking anybody's territory. So we are Indians, all of us are Indians, and whatever we are doing to Indians. These Europeans who have settled in Israel are different people.
And again, on the front of education, first of all, there's no issue on what you're saying to say that there should be good education provided to each and every member of every community, Indian, whichever community they belong to. There's no issue on that score. But you also must take something into score that there is no discrimination against any community. And that is something I think we need to come out today with, because there's this constant feeling that there is some kind of discrimination qua communities. No, there isn't. It is provided on a common platform. So you go ahead with that principle and yes, improve the law in whichever way, best way it is possible.
The Constitution in terms provides for positive discrimination so far as
at
minorities
this point of
are
time,
concerned.
Saif, to say you require a positive discrimination
Of course you
and
do.
an
Of
affirmative
course, the very
action,
fact that we are-
I think we are going to step way backward.
So the only discrimination you require, positive discrimination you require is in favor of SCs and STs. That's all.
Well, that's something also that
Please
should be
do
thought
away
about.
with all kinds of positive
Sure.
discrimination.
You-
Do away with
you
the SC
can't
reservation,
even
do away with the
think
ST and OBC, and then do away with minority
I
reservation.
beseech you to say this,
Please,
that yes, it should be removed. Let's see
please
if we
remove
can
the SC reservation.
I-
say it once.
See, the point is not that.
The point is
Yeah,
that.
of course it is.
Of course that
Egalitarianism
is the
means all
आप
reservations
कह के
should be
बताइए
removed.
ना.
Well,
I
there's one thing.
I stand on one Javed bhai, will you allow me to
Not
say
dare
it?
to say it.
I think all,
I
all
wish
that-
Javed would stop daring me. I
all
mean,
that
considering he used to eat green chilies at one point of time simply because there was this feeling of going behind prison, as he was telling me.
But
No,
now I've grown
I must. So,
Khurshid.
I will say this, that we have to face a time where we cannot talk about affirmative action when we are doing everything on a common platform. And I
Are we?
stand by that.
Actually, you're going off in a different direction, and
Of
that
course.
would require a full hour. But let me just bring you back to what you said on Gurgaon and the prayers and so on.
If you like.
Education also partly. There is a, I believe there's a description of Mr. Javed Akhtar as a cultural Muslim. I think that's a very interesting concept. And the cultural Muslim has education, cultural Muslim has language, cultural Muslim has behavior, cultural Muslim has an ambience and ethos, etc. And you can see that amongst all of us, the person who gets the most applause is Mr. Javed Akhtar. So I think that you've got to ask him a little bit more about what is it about cultural Muslimness that is so significant, important, that needs to be preserved.
I'll tell you, no problem. You see, I don't share my culture with a Tamilian Muslim. I don't share my culture with the Malayali Muslim. They are different people. Maybe they are Muslim, they go to namaz, I don't, and so on. I don't share my language with them. I share my culture with my Lucknow neighbor who speaks wonderful Urdu. Maybe he's a caste, maybe he's a Brahmin, doesn't matter. So my culture is Urdu. My culture is biryani and kebab. My culture is Urdu poetry and tehzeeb, kurta, pajama and adab. Not salam alaikum.
Sahi, ye to sahi.
Salam alaikum is a religious salam.
Yes.
Adab is a secular salam.
And Khuda Hafiz as opposed to Allah. Khuda Hafiz.
Ek. Dusre, I'll tell you what. One day I was coming out of the parliament and I saw Mr. Shahabuddin, the savior, messiah of Muslims of India. He was standing
Late
there.
Mr. Shahabuddin.
So he started pantomiming, looking at me. So I went to him, I said, what happened, sir? He said, Bhaiya, aapne to ghazab kar diya. What have you done? What have you said? I said, what have I said? You have said that you are not a Muslim. I said, I have never said that. Of course, you have said in your interview that you are an atheist. I said, yes, I have said that. So, how can you be Muslim? I said, I am a Muslim atheist. I am a Muslim atheist. He said, वो क्या होता है? वो कुछ नहीं होता है. So I'll come with me to Bombay. And there are some people who are generally responsible for the communal rights. I'll take you to them and tell them he is an atheist. That's why he's not a Muslim. So next time when there is any riot, because of my speeches, don't burn his house. If they agree, fine. But the fact is that I am doomed, I am condemned to be affected because of his speeches.
But
That's why I'm a Muslim.
This is a very important point.
Yeah.
And
That is critical. That's
it
very
is a
critical.
That's
point.
critical.
And a lot that we've discussed already may well be part of it, not entirely, but
Yeah.
just to some extent.
And how do I leave it?
But
How do
then-
I leave this title?
but-
By people leave the title by converting to some other religion. I was born in one stupidity. Do you think I'll accept another stupidity on my own?
But Javed, on this very important point, that is the kind of civilization, in fact, that you are referring to.
Yes.
On this civilization, as you rightly said, language is very important. Being obsessed with data as a social scientist, I return to the census again and look at the evolution of Urdu speakers.
I think so.
At least those who say that they are Urdu speakers. The trend is continuously declining, and not in Andhra Pradesh, not in Hyderabad, but in UP and Bihar. Don't you see this civilization somewhat endangered?
Yes, it is. As a matter of fact, Urdu is in a very strange situation. The Urdu lovers are increasing. Urdu
Speakers.
is being read in Devanagari by millions and millions of people, and the number is increasing.
Yeah.
But Urdu script is going away because there is no government patronage. So, but it is a very stupid thing because no language can belong to any religion. I mean, Bangladesh is the living proof that Urdu is not a language of Muslims. 10 crore Bengali said, we don't want to learn Urdu. We want to learn Bengali. I mean, can you imagine that in spite of that, people believe that Urdu is the language of Muslims? I mean, was Urdu the language of Nazrul Islam? Qazi Nazrul Islam, the great poet of Bengali? Or Bashir, the great writer of Malayali? Is their language? Or these Arabs speak Urdu? Or the Central Asian Muslims speak Urdu? Urdu is an Indian language. It is only spoken in the subcontinent and wherever these people have gone. So it has nothing to do with religion, but somehow it was believed because they were dividing history. History is still changing. Recently, congratulations to many people, Maharana Pratap has won Haldi Ghati war. So it has happened very recently. So they had two versions of history. They tore the lands into pieces. The country was divided. Now this Urdu was the living proof that two-nation theory is wrong. So what could they do? That you take the verbs and I'll take the nouns. So it had to be pushed one way. The fact is that as late as 1797, I'm sorry, for the first time, Quran was translated, 1897, Quran was translated in Urdu by a gentleman, Shah Abdul Qadir, in Delhi. And all the imams and all the Maulvis and all the muftis gave fatwa against him, that how dare he translate this holy book in this heathen, dirty language.
That's because Allah understands only Arabic, sir.
Yeah, and in 50, 60 years, they put a topi on this language's head. So it was all political.
So
Urdu is one language which was
something else, actually.
agnostic, atheistic, right from the very inception. Urdu poets, Urdu writers have always written against religion, against conservative values. In Urdu poetry, these conservative people, Sheikh, Mullah, Zahid, Muhtasib, all these people, Maulvi, they are the villains of Ghazal.
True. Yeah.
And it was sent to Pakistan. I mean, poor Sindhis and poor Balochs are learning Urdu, and we are deprived. It is our mother tongue.
Before we open, before the floor is open for Q&A, I'm sure you will have few words to add.
Not on the Urdu aspect, but I wanted to say something about another aspect which ought to be touched in a debate on Islam and modernity. And I think it's a very crucial point, that there is an inner war within Islam. And the reason for that inner war is that every Tom, Dick and Harry is claiming ownership over his own brand of Islam. And the problem is this.
It's true of every religion.
When Medina was bombed, there were 10,000 Muslims in India who put up Facebook posts saying, oh, there is this hadith which says that the person who bombs Medina will go to hell or will rot in hell. I assure you, it was the same hadith which in the first place inspired that man to bomb Medina. So the problem is that the Quran and the hadith are minefields of ambiguity. You can cherry pick verses to suit your convenience.
Yeah, but you see, it's true everywhere.
Sir, may I say something?
Just a sentence on this. The Gita interpreted by Tilak and by Mahatma Gandhi.
So therefore, what is required is a clear-cut interpretation. Why does nobody wrongly interpret Newton's theory?
That's modernity.
That is modernity.
May I say something? This is the last time I'm speaking now.
Yes,
but we
yes.
have-
Quick word, and then we open the floor for discussion.
See, after 200 years or 500 years, how one will decide when humanity and human being became modern? When the wheel was invented? When the first automobile was made? When steam engine was made? When first jet engine was made? When man landed on moon? When? All these times where we are living will be considered in dark ages, because man will be considered rational, modern, and liberated when he'll get rid of religion. As long as you have religion, you are in dark ages. There is no doubt about it.
Thank you very
Because
much.
these beliefs are from dark ages. If you believe in them, you are in dark ages. As simple as that.
There's also a religion without God, and I think that's what you're pointing to.
Yeah.
I am against faith, not only religion. Faith. You have to question everything. And the fantastic thing is that a religion which is the ultimate truth doesn't allow you to question.
India in the land of
It's a strange
argumentative people. So
I
at the
don't
right
know
place.
which religion doesn't allow you to argue or to actually transform itself. So I don't know if we are ready for an age where you say no religion and that's the only way to go forward, or no faith. I think we are still in an age where we do require faith, where we do require direction. You may vary on practices in any religion, but at the same time to say the religion per se is something which is unacceptable, I think is unacceptable, at least to me.
I think you will not reconcile yourself on that ground.
What is faith?
Question.
Now, we should have a definition of this word faith. What is the difference between faith and belief? I believe there is North Pole. I have never gone there. Is it my faith? No, it's not my faith, it's my belief. I know because it can be confirmed. There are people who have gone there. The logic says that there has to be, if the earth is round and earth is round, so there has to be something like that, North Pole and South Pole. It has to be, it is inevitable, and so on. That is why it is not faith, it is belief. Belief needs evidence, rationale, witness, logic. Faith is a conclusion that neither has witness, nor logic, nor evidence, nor rationale. Right?
Fake news.
And what is stupidity?
That's very far-fetched.
If you believe something without all these things, that is stupidity. But you see, it's a mass stupidity. Today, if you come to know I pray Jupiter, you will think I'm mad. But there was a time when people used to worship Jupiter. It means the number justifies the stupidity. If 2 crore people start worshipping Jupiter, you won't say that.
Thank you very much. We have 15 minutes for the Q&A. That's what we wanted. Try to restrain your question. Jupiter and Newton may be out for the Q&A. And there is a mic that will circulate. Please.
Thank you. That was enlightening. With all the questions around, and I'm glad that you said it should be religion and modernity. Thank you. Because all these differences of regressive practice are in every religion. What is your view on taking that away, and actually in India, where the focus is on minority and questioning minority practice, is to actually have a wider conversation about what practices are across the board not acceptable, across the board, we should do something about this. And that includes not renting flats to people because they're of a certain minority, or saying you can't come and work for me because you're of a certain religion. When are we going to have those conversations?
Let's take several questions. There are so many questions that will take 6 or 7 questions to make sure that you're not frustrated. And I'm sure the panelists will respond en bloc.
My question is regarding the equality between men and women in Islam. One of the things which was left out was the question of evidence. Now, for a woman to divorce a husband, she requires, I think, 4 male witnesses.
Not at all.
Whereas in the case of a man, he could do with 2 or 1.
No, that's
Now,
Pakistan.
that doesn't seem very fair.
That's in Pakistan.
And I don't know how that would be considered an egalitarian
I'm glad we
practice.
seized this opportunity to clarify some of the fake news.
Yes.
One person before on the front, you, sir.
Thank you. All very, very interesting. I'd like to put 2 brief scenarios and invite people's comments about bridge building. One, the incident of Malala's, the shooting of her, and the other, Amjad Sabri's assassination. And I wonder, how can we build bridges of understanding that are compatible with, humanitarian, the compassion of Islam? How can we move things forward, please?
Thank you. On your left, and then we'll move toward the east. Please.
The name of your book is Islam and Modernity.
No.
No.
This is the book which you want to sell.
It's a panel.
This one.
Oh, this one, Islam's and
and
modernities.
You want to sell this book?
No.
You have.
No, I
gone
was
this-
citing it. It's 25
you
years
never
old.
sell one book in this after listening to Javed, Akhtar and Pinky.
Good. चल
ठीक है let's
Please.
I don't know से बोला क्या है
ठीक है कोई बात
You're bad for commerce.
I just wanted to ask the question
just
about
extra commercium
about
which is illegal
making fun
bad for
of
commerce.
religion. Mr. Akhtar will probably
Mr.
comment on this.
Yeah.
The reason I ask is I belong to the Church of the FSM, which we, as our religious symbol, we wear a colander on our heads. A colander is something where you can drain spaghetti and stuff like that. So when I wear that, I am laughed at by many people, and they make fun of my religion. Is it permitted for people to make fun of religion?
Yeah.
it should be
Should be, yes.
We'll ask Salman Rushdie. That's right.
Huh?
Sir.
You're bad company.
तमीज़ और तहजीब की बात है मेरे ख्याल से ये तो
वो
ये
तो अलग बात है.
it's a
Hi,
question of yeah.
I just have a question about when you talked about education for all. The problem is, I think the education we are providing now or where we are moving to in India is probably not good for anybody. Forget about educating more Muslims because we are talking about doing away with Darwin theory, like people are talking about it, creationism, and a lot of other ways, insidious ways in which we are, like in our textbooks, especially at the primary level, a lot of things are being put in which are not right, or as Mr. Akhtar said, historically not correct. So I think we need a different model. And
Yeah.
it's,
So we'll have education and modernity next time. Just behind. Yes, sir. Yeah.
There's a book in the British Library written by a Muslim woman from 1944 called Purdah and Polygamy, Life in an Indian Muslim Household. And my question is, we need, Iqbal Anisa Hussain is her name, republished last month after 70 years. My question is, we need to be much better at reclaiming Muslim women voices, particularly from the 1930s and 40s. They were there, they were writing, there are books around. Iqbal Anisa Hussain is an example of one, and we need to bring that into the narrative. She was talking about the restraining dimensions of Purdah and polygamy in 1944. 1944. So I think that's the point. There are women who were writing about that, talking about it at the time. Just because they're not in history doesn't mean they weren't there. Let's bring that into the conversation.
Yep. Very good point. Shall we move up and then I'll ask the 2 more questions? Yeah, please. And then I'll ask the panelists to react, not respond.
You can ask Javed sir to respond to every question together.
Please.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I think while we move towards no religion or or
All
more
religions,
rational religions. We're still living with where religions have specific leaders. So I just want to know from the panel, is it bottom up that the change has to happen, or is it top down? Because we now have the Pope who's making statements about the environment, about homosexuality, and while it will take a long time to perpetrate, to go all the way down, what is the role of the religious leaders? And in the case of Hinduism, I will point directly to the RSS, even though they don't claim to be a religious organization. They are the ones that are influencing communities on the ground. Or is it bottom up that we have to change and then push them to change?
Good. Let's do some justice to some of these questions. You said you would respond to the last one.
This one, I just want
Go
to
ahead.
say, I just want to answer this question. I don't know whether bottom up or top down, but the change has to come from within first. I think it's a Javed Akhtar or a Salman, Khurshid or a Saif Mahmood telling the regular Muslim on the Indian street to change is not going to bring about any change. Unless the change comes from within what the problem with Indian Muslims is that they will not listen to what Salman Sahab or Javed Sahab have to say, but they will listen to the illiterate Maulvi every Friday on a congregation. So unless the change comes from there, it's not going to be effective. We have got this judgment, the Crippled Talaq judgment. Is that going to really bring about any change in the lives of Muslim women?
Yes.
It's unless the Qazi, the Maulvi, in his fatwa on Friday says, as long as there is religion, says that no, this is not right, this is what you have to do, nothing is going to change.
Can I just add to this one very briefly? I think actually change can come from anywhere. It can come from the top, it can come from within, it can come from outside, it can come from the court. The point is change has to come. So as long as that movement starts and it happens, it is implemented. In which direction, of course, time will always tell. But if Saif says that the judgment will have no impact on this without the Maulvis or the Qazis, I don't agree. You do manage to permeate, and that's the only way. You've seen it across all practices, and I'm not saying this only for Crippled Talaq, all practices. Sati was prohibited by law. It still carried on for a while. It was only after a point of time that when action started being taken in courts, etc., and this consciousness came. So law can be a tool of social change, or social change can be implemented by way of a law or through otherwise. So therefore, whichever way the change happens, the point is it has to happen and should happen.
I agree with her. There has to be a law. You see, if you believe that someday the Maulvi or Mullah will say anything which will loosen their grip on the common Muslim, I think it's a dream which will never be fulfilled. It has to be imposed and it has to be implemented strictly. If you will wait for them, then it is waiting for Godot.
So undoubtedly a law has to be there.
Yes.
My point is not to slight the law.
Law is
or to
not
say
enough.
That there shouldn't be a law. It's not
Agreed.
enough. Law is not enough.
Make it impossible for them. Make it dangerous for them.
But we see that happening somewhat. Looking at who got the IAS among the Muslims this year, only 49 people, 4.something%. Well, half of them had been trained by the Zakat Foundation, and the Zakat Foundation is an NGO training the people for passing this exam. So these kind of self-help organizations, but it will take time if there is no other support from outside. I'd like to return to the question on education, because to refer to what Javed was saying between belief and faith, don't we see more and more faith-based textbooks written these days, and isn't it that a problem in terms of the rationalization of the mind?
So there is another problem. It's a deficiency of trust. There is a deficit of trust. Because you see, if we see the establishment, the powers that be are secular, and they take right steps all the time, then if they'll take this kind of step, the mullah will have no ground at all. And even the average man will think that, all right, they have always been fair, and if they have done this, then this also must have been fair. It is not so. People who are so bothered about Shaira Bano are not bothered about Bilqis Bano, who was raped in Gujarat. They defend the rapist here and then sympathize with Shaira Bano. How can any Muslim will believe them? only a staunchly secular system can bring these kind of changes, and it will be acceptable to an average Muslim.
We have 5 minutes left. I suggest that at the back, some of the irrepressible questions can be asked. Because I know how frustrating that is. Oh, you do need a mic. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm Aisha. I'm from Modern School, Vasant Vihar.
And you need the mic close to your mouth.
Okay, and I just gave my boards. And we started this debate on how equal rights are very important and how all religions should be equal. And then we come to when Saif sir said that SC and ST's rights should be removed. I want to know how the SC and ST rights can be removed when we're getting equality and those people do not have rights. We are not giving them rights.
Your husband. We get your point. Thank you.
Yes, mister.
Yes. Don't take the mic with you.
It's somebody else.
Is religion man-made?
Is religion man-made?
Okay, firstly, I'm also from modern
That's
school.
a complicated
but
question.
50-year-old. And I just want to say that I grew up in an India. I live here now, and I've lived abroad for 25 years. I grew up in an India where all my friends, I didn't know which religion they belonged to. I had no clue what their parents were doing. They were just my friends. And the only thing I have to say is that, is this really a modern society?
No.
Where India was deemed a secular country to unify the country. And I believe that, and I can see here, that this religion has actually fractionalized it and completely broken it apart. So I don't know whether the government plays a role or whatever the panel has said, but it is really sad.
Thank you for the testimony.
May I respond to this?
You will, both of you. Only 2 more points, and then Javed and Saif will respond.
Hi, I just wanted to flip this around a bit. So we're kind of assuming that modernity is the good thing and that religion is the bad thing. But what parts of Islam specifically would help us in our modern culture, and how, particularly in Britain, we're seeing more children on social media and less kind of in touch with the spirit. So what parts of Islam do you think are actually beneficial to a modern society?
Great. I think we should now probably get back to the panel because we have only 2-3 minutes left. I know how disciplined we are at the GLF, even in London. Javed.
I would like to respond to that,
Please do.
Yeah. Ma'am, I don't know what you have heard or what you have read, but I assure you that India is still the same. Still, friends don't bother about their friends' religion, and there are friends from every community in every community.
Yeah,
so nothing has changed. Yes, it's a huge country. There are some irritants and there are some discriminations and biases, but not only on religious basis. There are many bases. Any Muslim can hope to find a good job in India, but not Barkhadat. He cannot get any job. So discriminations are, all kind of discriminations are there. But the fact is that as far as the society is concerned, it is as secular as it was. There are some influences, but they are temporary. Believe you me, it is not the temperament of India, and it shall cease to exist.
I would love to end on this note.
Okay.
You sure?
Yeah.
So let's end on this note.
Yes.
We'll let that pass.
Let's end on this
We'll keep
note.
our disagreements to ourselves, I think, on that.
So thank you very much.
Thank you. A big thank you.